Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm so excited to have our audience joining from all over the world today. Please drop in the chat and let us know where you're joining from today. And if you're joining our webinar for the first time, I'm Tao, founder of the Journey Note, a global life skills platform that helps young people navigate their life journey with confidence through connection with global peers and internationally certified experts. At the Journey Note, we have 7 life skills pillars: self-discovery, career toolkit, personal finance, relationships, communication, health, and technology. Now, today we are exploring a topic with our partner, Nodeledge, that sits under 3 of our pillars: self-discovery, career toolkit, and technology. And our topic is how the science of learning can supercharge your skills for life. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat, and I will pick them up along the way. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by Mark Worrell, founder and CEO of Nodeledge today. In the next 1 hour, Mark will take us through practical science-backed strategies to learn faster, retain knowledge, and make new skills more effectively. Mark, we are excited to hear from you. So please take us away.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Tara said, I'm Mark, founder at Nodeledge.ai. Nodeledge is an edtech company focused on delivering online learning to people looking to learn to code or to get into machine learning. I'll talk a little bit more about Nodeledge later, but for now, I just want to get on and talk about one of my favorite topics, the science of learning. As a small aside, I've been interested in this for a long time now. It's only though really been the last few years that I started looking at the research more deeply. And I was kind of expecting there to be like many competing views of what worked and what doesn't, but there isn't really. Like to a large extent, what we know about how the brain works and what is like evidence-based and effective for learning is like largely agreed upon and decades old, surprisingly. So just a little overview of what we'll cover. We're going to motivate like why we think learning feels hard. We'll then present a toy model of the brain, and then we'll look at some implications of that before diving into some practical tips that you can use to enable you to become more effective learners. We'll then take a detour via something called mastery learning, and then do a demo of the Nodeledge platform. And finally, we'll have plenty of time for questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. So I'll speak for roughly around 30 minutes in total, so there's plenty of time there for people to get involved with their own questions. So why does learning feel hard? Well, it's complicated and often it's quite personal, but many of the reasons are actually quite common. Right, to understand this better, let's meet Sam. Sam's going to be our main protagonist throughout today's presentation. Sam is a data analyst who wants to change career and he wants to work in AI or machine learning. He's been learning Python, which is a programming language, for almost a year now, but he's frustrated with his progress. As a personal note, I learned to code properly as an adult over 10 years ago now, and so I've actually got first-hand experience with some of these problems we're about to discuss next. So let's look at some of Sam's problems. Well, Sam has taken lessons on topics, and then he later realizes that he just can't remember anything that he studied. Secondly, like often when Sam learns something, he feels overwhelmed and his head starts to hurt. And when this happens, he basically clicks on social media and gets distracted from learning. Also, Sam often thinks he's learned something, but when he comes to apply that skill or knowledge, he freezes. As the physicist Richard Feynman famously said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This is an illusion of competence. There are also quite a few things or terms that Sam keeps hearing again and again, but he doesn't really know what they are. Nevertheless, he's just decided to carry on anyway and see how things go. Cramming. Sam actually did manage to pass his last programming exam, but he had to stay up all night to do it. And if he's being honest with himself, he can't really now remember any of the things that he studied that night. And finally, there are quite a few concepts that Sam thinks look familiar, but he's struggling to understand how they all fit together with things that he's learned previously. Okay, so these are some of the common problems that we think Sam has that are blocking him from making progress in his learning. And now we've covered those, let's say what Sam's goal is. Yes, he'd love to learn to code, but I think if we looked behind that, we'd see that Sam really wants to become an independent learner. But if your experience is anything like mine, you can basically go through school, university, and most of your career with the same ineffective learning habits and strategies. Like no one teaches us this stuff. No one tells us how to become effective and independent learners. Yet mastering these skills can have like an outsized impact on our lives. And so to understand some of the trouble that Sam is having, we need to take a quick detour into how the brain works when we're learning something new. Now, what I'm going to present is necessarily highly simplified, but it does contain the key components which will allow us to understand some of the problems that Sam is having when he's learning, and crucially, how we can remedy them. Just before we do that, we need to be clear on what learning actually is. It sounds very obvious to state this definition, but it's actually quite profound. Learning is a change in long-term memory. This takes advantage of something called our brain's neuroplasticity. In essence, everything we do changes something in memory to a greater or lesser extent. And that may or may not be a desirable change. So when we are learning, we are after a desirable change in long-term memory that is relatively permanent. And it's interesting to think about why this is important, right? Like experts, if we wanted to develop expertise, experts are not faster or better than us because they just think harder, right? Ironically, experts actually think less in the moment because over time they've built rich mental schemas. So what feels complex to a novice or a beginner is already like chunked into meaningful patterns for the expert. Like for example, a chess grandmaster does not see 32 individual pieces on the board. They see like structured patterns and positions that they've encountered hundreds or thousands of times before. This applies to like, coding, math, sports, music. In this way, like expertise is really just well-organized memory built through thousands and thousands of focused and structured encounters. So when we're learning something new, we're not just collecting facts. We are like gradually wiring these facts into mental schemas that make future learning easier. Okay, so now on to possibly my favorite slide, like a simple toy model of the brain. It's going to help Sam understand his brain better and hopefully ours as well, so we can become more effective learners. Let's start on the left with the environment. The environment contains many things. There's visual input, there's visual distraction, there's the explanation that we're meant to be paying attention to, there's some study notes perhaps, or a textbook that we've got in front of ourselves, and there's maybe some audio input, and maybe some distraction in the environment as well. Attention, moving to the right, is the gatekeeper. Only the things we notice enter our working memory. And our working memory is tiny. It can hold around 4 chunks maximum, but it is where all of our conscious thinking happens. If we encode something from working memory, it enters long-term memory. Long-term memory is massive. There's never been a discovered limit of long-term memory for all practical purposes for humans, which is an incredibly, I find, empowering view of things. But it's only if we revisit and use things in long-term memory that it actually stays there or is able to recall it. So we want to go from the left to right in this diagram, right? We want to take knowledge that's in the environment. We need to attend to it to put it into working memory. And then we need to encode it from working memory into our long-term memory. Because remember, learning is a change in long-term memory. Now, on the bottom here, the red arrows is forgetting. Like forgetting is inevitable, right? There's rapid forgetting, like when you meet someone and they tell you their name, and then 5 seconds later you can't remember it. That's like rapid forgetting from working memory. It went in and straight back out. Nothing went into long-term memory. There's also forgetting from long-term memory. This is a slower process. It's things we did once encode, but like gradually over time, if we don't access that knowledge, it decays until ultimately like we can't remember it. Just to close off this diagram, 2 black arrows here, retrieval coming from long-term memory to working memory. Obviously, we can pull facts and procedures and knowledge that we have in long-term memory into working memory to think about it. Equally, when something's in working memory, let's say we're doing a calculation or something, or thinking about some complex topic, we can externalize it to our environment. Like we can draw a diagram, we can write something on a whiteboard, we can take notes, etc., and put things back into the environment. Okay, I'll just pause there if there's any questions, because now we're going to look at some of the implications of this toy model. So I think it's important that we hopefully all clear on it.
Mark, can I have a question if I may, please?
Yeah, of course.
So we have working memory and long-term memory. Um, how can you differentiate the two of these?
As an individual,
Yeah, like how
I
do we
mean,
know? And also how can we, is there anything that we can practice to, make our memories last longer, or it's easy to pull out our memories?
yeah, I mean, we're gonna come to this basically. I mean,
Mhm.
just to look ahead and spoil it a little bit. The short answer is, if you can't if you can't do the thing unaided, like the next week or the next month, it wasn't in long-term memory, right? It was just shoved into short-term memory, and then it's gone as soon as you like close off the browser tab or close off the thing you're doing, right? That's like basically the distinction. If it's a temporary fleeting thing, it was in working memory. Like think of, you're trying to dial a phone number or enter a password, and you just like repeat these digits to yourself many times, type in the thing, and then 10 seconds later, right, you don't know what they were. That's like working memory. If you could recall it the following week, it was obviously then in long-term memory. This is like crucially that's like the crucial distinction. That's going to motivate the difference between performance and learning, which we'll come to later, but I don't want to jump ahead too far for now, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Love that. Thank you. Definitely, I would have a lot more follow-up questions, but I'm sure you cover a lot of them in
Okay,
the next
let's see,
section.
let's
So
see.
please go ahead.
Okay, the first implication of this model is that attention and working memory are fragile. Attention is our gatekeeper. Only what we attend to gets into this small space of working memory. So if Sam is looking at his phone whilst he's studying, or he's listening to music, or he's splitting attention across other tasks, then he's got competing stimuli. That's going to make it difficult for him to focus on the core task at hand. And as we said, this working memory is the bottleneck. It's fragile. If we try and push too much into it, if we've got these competing stimuli, then we're going to get overwhelmed and learning collapses. This is going to be one of the key things we can keep coming back to. Like, if we blow our working memory capacity, we don't learn anything. Okay, it's very, very easy to overload working memory. So we're going to use this term called cognitive load as like a critical term for understanding how we can manage the capacity of our working memory. Okay, so we basically want to have a cognitive load that is less than our working memory capacity. Okay, otherwise we're going to blow working memory and we're not going to learn anything. I think we've all probably had that experience where things just feel a little bit too much and we disengage. Maybe we start procrastinating or whatever else. Usually that's a sign that we've like blown working memory. The second thing here to note, or key thing that's important, is that all learning is prerequisite based. Like Sam is not intrinsically bad at maths or coding. He's likely suffering from missing background knowledge. In fact, he's tried coding courses before, but most of them just assume too much familiarity with like computer science fundamentals that he's never studied. And these missing links are what's led him to constantly feel confused. We're going to keep coming back to this point as well, again and again. It's not Sam's intelligence that's holding him back. It's mostly a lack of prerequisite knowledge. Now, he could further help himself by breaking the content he's studying into smaller, so-called scaffolded steps to avoid overloading his working memory. And it's worth dwelling here that most people quit on a learning journey when they like trying to learn a concept or idea or step that's just too big for them, right? They can't fit it into working memory. There's no way to break it down, and they just give up at that point. So we want each step we're taking on this journey to be small enough to fit into working memory and backed by prerequisite knowledge such that we can make progress. And talking of progress, we need to make sure that each block is secure before we move on. Like Sam's confusion isn't stupidity. It's often just a sign that his foundations aren't set yet. And it's solid foundations of knowledge that's going to prevent collapse later on. And I like this phrase, you're not stupid, you just like the prerequisites. Cool. Now, Tao, onto the slide that probably deals with your point a little bit better. This is probably the like single most dangerous illusion in learning. It's this distinction between performance and learning. Sam himself has like often nailed complex challenges at work. Like his job as a data analyst means he's written some pretty complicated logic, But ironically, like he didn't learn anything whilst he was doing it. So let's just think about how that's possible. How can someone perform a complex task or skill but not have learned anything? Well, it's because performance is in the moment. It's a fleeting thing. Whereas as we've seen, learning is a change in long-term memory. There are many reasons we can perform but not learn. As I've said, like if you're looking up a phone number, you can just repeat it or repeat some facts to yourself, and a few minutes later, it's gone. That's performance without learning. Same thing happens if you just start rereading some study notes. You like shove something to working memory, you nod along, you feel like it's stuck, but nothing actually got encoded in long-term memory. Or we might be using tools, right, that do the work for us. So we might be using AI or some software at work, etc. And that's basically putting in the work for us. Now, just to say, this isn't intrinsically bad. Often we just need to get the job done right. We need to perform in the moment. But if we ourselves are looking to level up, to learn something new, we need to be the ones putting in the cognitive effort. Like a good analogy here is like lifting weights. Sorry for people who don't lift weights, but I think everyone's familiar with the concept. Like if someone else lifts them for you, you don't get stronger. Okay, that's obvious to say, and but the equivalent applies to the mental domain, right? Like if we're not lifting the mental weights, we don't get cognitively stronger. What are lifting mental weights? Well, fundamentally, it's an active process, right? Like we have to be testing ourselves, problem solving, generating explanations, etc. Not engaging in passive techniques. Passive techniques like rereading study notes, watching videos, highlighting things are largely ineffective. So we need to have something that feels a little bit effortful, and that makes us feel clumsy, right? That is a price we're paying for durable memory. Easy learning is an illusion, and an illusion that many influencer will try and sell you on, that you can, in 1 hour, do these 5 things and master this complex topic, right? Like it's a very easy trap to fall into, like every, get rich quick scheme, but it is an illusion, right? Like it's not gonna cause a durable change in long-term memory. Now, one last point, this right bottom thing, disfluency. Often when we're learning something, we feel a little bit confused or a little bit clunky, clumsy mentally. That's actually a sign that we are learning something generally. Now, don't confuse this with being overloaded. If we are overloaded in working memory, we don't learn anything. But just feeling a little bit like clunky, a little bit clumsy with the concepts, it's like kind of making sense, but not quite there yet. That's like a necessary path we have to go on to get something encoded into long-term memory. Need to get, to some extent, comfortable with being uncomfortable when we are learning. Okay, on to the final implication here. Oh, sorry, last slide showing a picture there, which I quite like. Like just to clarify, like to learn, we need to be the ones putting in the cognitive effort. And finally, I think most of us, definitely true for Sam, have forgotten more than we know. And like whilst forgetting is relentless and inevitable, there is a positive story at the heart of this, right? I think recall from our toy model of the brain what we learned about working memory, long-term memory, sorry. It's essentially infinite. We don't need to worry about filling it up. There's no sense in which we push something out as we put new knowledge in. However, we do make, or we can make certain things easier to recall than others. Basically, the more we repeat a skill or recalling a piece of knowledge, the easier it becomes. We get mentally stronger. And it's this retrieval practice that will build up fluency. There's like some technical details, like if you're familiar with spaced repetition systems or software like Anki, these like built on this premise that the best way or the most effective way to like recall something is just at the point you're about to forget it. So it's much better to do like spaced practice through time. So like, 15 minutes every few days than doing one big like, cramming session at the weekend. Like you almost want to get to the point where you're just about to forget something, then recall it, just about to forget something, and then recall it. And that strengthens the memory traces more than if you did everything in one go. So it's this like effortful recall that will like give us this fluency or automaticity tomorrow. And I think there's a really important point here about creativity. Like creativity does not emerge from thin air. Like it rests on a foundation of memorized knowledge and fluent skills. And it's only by moving this information into durable storage and long-term memory, that means we can automate the basics, and that's going to allow us to free up our working memory. Like we're going to be able to reduce this cognitive load in working memory if we've got loads of things stored durably in long-term memory that we can easily pull on. So in essence, the more we put into long-term memory, the easier it becomes to working memory. And working memory, as we said, is like this key fragile bottleneck that's easily blown. That's going to build memorization. Memorization is going to make us fluent, and fluency is what's going to unlock creativity. I might be talking, it might be feeling abstract now, but if you think of sports or music, there is no sense in which, like, top musicians do not have the fundamentals like absolutely nailed. And the same is for sports stars as well. They can drill, they've done drills, they've done this practice probably thousands of times, and they've built up this like automaticity, which means when they come to execute higher order or complex skills, they're not having to pause or think in the moment, right? It's just fully automatic for them. The same
Yeah,
applies.
absolutely.
Sorry?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
The same applies for cognitive work, right? If we have to pause to work out 6 times 7, great, we can work it out. That's cool, reconstructing knowledge, but we're taking up space in working memory. Whereas if we just know the answer is 42, we don't have to, take up a space in working memory there. We're just pulling it straight from long-term memory. Oh, that's not what I expected next. Okay, I don't know why the slides gone a bit weird there. Let me just reshare this maybe. Can you see again?
Yes, I can see your slide. It's the
It's
tomorrow tactics slide, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still gone a little bit out of order. I'll persevere. Um, okay, so now we're going to look at some of the practical implications of what we need to do basically to help ourselves. So I'm going to give 4 do things and 2 think things. Okay, the 4 do things are going to be like practical things we can take away, try and do tomorrow, and the think things are things that we need to bear in mind. Almost like dealing with the emotional side of learning, which can often make us feel a little bit demotivated at times. So the first thing we're going to want to do on the left here is manage our cognitive load. We need to cut distractions from the environment. We need to be taking concepts one idea at a time, chunking it small enough so it can fit into working memory. And we need to also lean into the fact that there is cognitive effort involved. So the simple steps here are really take one chunk, one idea at a time, clean our environment, close browser tabs, shut down social media, turn off notifications, anything that's going to be competing stimuli for our attention, that's going to push things into working memory that are not core to the thing we want to learn. And then we want to lean into the effort. As I said, like learning is an active process. Things like rereading notes, watching videos is largely performance theatre, right? We have to be the ones doing the work. We have to be active in that process. So a cue for ourselves here is if we are ever in a situation where things feel too smooth, like it feels like this is gliding along, it's going amazingly well, it's usually a sign that we're just being too passive, right? We have to catch ourselves and say like, how can I make this more active? Could I actually reconstruct this knowledge tomorrow if I tried to, or next week? And then that's our cue to get active.
Mark, on this, I can see that you have cut distractions in the first box. I was just thinking that there are people, right? They can, study effectively if they listen to music, for example, like classical music. So how does it work there? So it means that music is not a distraction, but in an enabler in that situation.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm the same. I tend to listen to classical music when I study as well, but that's
Mm.
because only pieces that I'm very, very familiar with. And
Mm,
because at that point, the familiarity means that I'm like probably using very little capacity in working memory to attend to that music,
right.
like, or I'm somehow tuning it
Mm,
out. You have different input channels. Like you have auditory input, obviously, and visual input, and they are like somewhat parallel. So you can listen and look at something at the same time. But if I'm listening to, say, a podcast and trying to concentrate on something, like that's too distracting, right? It is a competing stimuli there, and I can't actually concentrate. Like if you're learning something that's maybe not challenging you too much, like you can comfortably fit that in working memory and you can listen to the music, then it's fine, right? Like I can drive and listen to a podcast, that's okay, right? Like those tasks both I'm able to manage in working memory because I've got some fluency there. But usually if and I'm probably true for you as well, Tao, and most people, like if you're really trying to learn something that's right at the edge of your like working memory capacity, generally I have to turn off all like other stimuli, right? I have to like, does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. I think now I realize that that's the reason why I really like the point that you raised, that because the music probably is a piece of music that you're familiar with. So, that is why you don't have to, lose a lot of capacity to continue to learn while still listening to the music.
Do
Thank
you
you.
think you could listen to I don't know, music with lyrics? Because I can't listen to music with lyrics and study
Oh
at the same.
no, not when I'm studying or doing work. Definitely not. Classical music is fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Maybe we can share as well, like our favorite pieces of classical music for studying as well.
Definitely.
Cool. On to the second thing now as well. Prerequisites. As we said, like all learning is prerequisite based. So we need to make sure that we've got our foundations secure before moving on. Like often when we hit a block and we start feeling a bit stupid or confused, it's not that obviously that we are stupid at it, and we may be confused, but we're not stupid. But usually it's that we've just run ahead of our prerequisite knowledge a little bit, right? We've just pushed on and we didn't have things secure. And the strategy then is we need to go back and ask ourselves, like, what are the component ideas of this? What specific bricks are missing from this? I don't know. And then we need to be systematic about going back and filling in those gaps. It's only by squashing these gaps in our prerequisite knowledge that we'll be able to then revisit it and master it. And often once we've done that, if we've been through this process before, you'll kind of notice how something that once confused you suddenly feels easy or obvious in some sense, right? It's not because suddenly we got smarter the next week or the next day. Okay, sometimes we might be a bit better rested, but usually it's just a change in prerequisite knowledge. Like prerequisite knowledge is the biggest predictor of whether someone will understand something. As a side note here, most of what we think of as intelligence is basically like differences in working memory capacity between individuals. We can't change our working memory capacity, right? We are born with it, and there's no evidence that we can actually change it. What we can change is our prerequisite knowledge. And the most reassuring thing is that prerequisite knowledge is the biggest predictor of whether we're going to be able to learn something new. So we want to really make sure that we've got our prerequisite knowledge in place before tackling something new. Yeah, I think I've kind of covered this with the managed load thing, like staying active as part of the learning journey. Like we need to be solving problems, we need to be generating explanations, we need to be not doing the traps of like watching YouTube videos 10 hours and thinking that constitutes learning. It might make us feel good and motivate us, but that's just performance theatre to a large extent. Like if we can't reconstruct that knowledge ourselves, we haven't learned something. Ideally, we'd work with like resources or platforms that give us this sort of like practice at the right level, but that's always not always the case, right? And look at how we can, you know, create that environment for ourselves to some extent. And finally, like we have to fight forgetting. Um, we've talked about this idea of spaced repetition. So this is somewhat hard to do without like an automated system, without software, but it can be done. Like if we use things like Anki or even flashcards, etc. Like we want to be actively recalling knowledge that we want to keep in long-term memory. We need to be revisiting it at certain points in time. So if we're designing curricula for students, etc., then we don't teach them one thing and then never revisit it throughout the term. We're going to be having checkpoints throughout that term where we come back to knowledge repeatedly and cause them to reactivate that knowledge, pull it from long-term memory, and therefore strengthen the memory traces. Disfluency. So this is this idea, as I said, about feeling a little bit clunky, a little bit clumsy as we're learning something new. And we need to really get comfortable with this idea that learning itself can feel a little bit uncomfortable. That productive struggle is a sign that we're often in the right zone, the sweet spot. The danger zone is actually when things are feeling too smooth, like I said, when we're going along and everything is just feeling far, far too easy. That's a sign that we're usually engaging in passive activities. And lastly, this distinction between performance and learning. It's quite easy if we are doing quizzes or parts of a course where we want to get 100% all the time, or we want to make ourselves feel good, that we can rely on cruxes or crutches in the moment that cause us to perform, but make it at the cost of making things not go into long-term memory, right? If we use too many tools in the moment, we're not the ones doing the cognitive work, like something else is. And that's not going to change long-term memory. So sometimes we have to take a small hit in the moment to get the right long-term gains that we want in long-term memory, right? So I think we should be less focused on, how we perform today and more focused on, can I recall this? Can I do this next week, next month, etc., etc. Cool. I will pause there before moving on to the next section. Any questions?
I think we're good for now. You can just move on.
Okay. So I want to talk about something that I'm quite fond of as a way to organize knowledge, and this idea of knowledge graphs. And this motivates or is an enabler of a pedagogical approach called mastery learning. So let's just zoom out and just clarify what a knowledge graph is. Well, if we think of a body of knowledge, obviously it's split across, thousands or hundreds of thousands of different topics and subtopics, etc. And each topic, see my cursor, has prerequisite topics, right? It has knowledge that it relies upon in order for us to understand it. So if we think about this node here, you can see my cursor, right, Tal? Yeah. Think of this topic here, then it relies on this one, and it relies on this one. And in turn, this one relies on this one, etc., etc. So if we took something like, I don't know, Pythagoras' theorem, then to understand that, we obviously need to know what a triangle is, we need to know how to add numbers, we need to know how to square numbers, etc., etc., etc. So we can imagine organizing knowledge explicitly in this way. And most people don't, but it's an idea that I'm very fond of. And it makes the relationship between the knowledge or the subtopics like explicit. We can look at any single topic we want to learn and trace out the prerequisite knowledge for it. Okay. Why do we care about this? Well, we care about it because it enables something called mastery learning. Mastery learning is basically the idea that you can only proceed to a new topic once you've mastered all the prerequisite topics. This sounds bloody obvious, but just think about traditional education, right? Think about being at school or at university. What determines whether you move forward at school or university is time. Okay, everyone moves forward to the next topic, the next module based on time. Performance is a variable, right? Everyone gets an A, B, C, D, and then moves on. And if we know one thing about building knowledge on top of knowledge with gaps and shaky foundations, it's that those knowledge gaps are going to compound over time and are going to eventually cause problems for everyone. Basically, even people who get an A have not mastered the entire knowledge base, right? There's still gaps in their knowledge. Those gaps are going to compound, lead to misconceptions, which are going to make future learning harder. And so mastery learning is this idea that we can only move to a new topic if we've mastered the prerequisite topics. In this way, time is the variable. Certain individuals are going to move faster or slower than other people through the course. But we don't change the bar. We say the bar is the high bar that everyone has to attain a certain performance level. You have to demonstrate mastery on all the prerequisites before you're allowed to move on to the next topic. So time is a variable, not the performance level. That's essentially what mastery learning is. There are other cool things you can do with knowledge graphs. So you can build up this knowledge fingerprint or a map of your knowledge. Like if you ticked the ones that you knew then you could get an idea of, where your strengths are. If you looked at those across different subject areas, where your weaknesses are. And that's kind of a cool way to be able to then think, okay, these are the areas that I need to go back and address. These are the gaps I need to fill. We can also do cool things around making learning more efficient. Like no one likes to take a course just to find out that the first 4 weeks of that course are just things we've already covered, right? It's boring. Who wants to sit through stuff they've already done? But if with the knowledge graph, if you looked at, say, this node here has been something you wanted to learn, well, we know it only depends on these 5 below, right? That I've got the arrows pointing into it. So we'd only have to study those prerequisite nodes, right? Even better, if we took a diagnostic test that assessed our knowledge, our starting point, it might determine that we already knew some of those prerequisite topics already. Bingo, we're now down to just 2 nodes or topics that we have to learn. So we've saved ourselves a bunch of time, right? We don't have to sit through lectures that teach us things we already know. It's like one size fits all approach to learning. We can just crack on immediately, working at the edge of our knowledge, working on where our weaknesses are today, and that's going to be the most productive use of our time.
Question on this. So for people and for all of us, right, when we are learning a new skills or learning something new, how do we know that, let's say we're going to study something online, it's just going to be an online course or watching things on YouTube. How do we know that they have all the prerequisites that we need?
I mean, they don't generally, right? I mean, this is
Mm.
one of my bugbears and why I'm like working on Nodeledge, right? Is it's very easy to sign up to a course, and I've been an independent or adult learner like for many years, like taking many courses where it just says, oh, all you need is you just need a knowledge of like this bit of math or something, whatever the thing is, and then you get into it and you realize there's way more assuming background knowledge, right? Like it's just that they brought along a load of other stuff with them. That makes it very hard, right? And that's why it becomes difficult for people because it's really difficult for a certain or an individual course creator or a writer of a textbook even to set a reasonable base level of knowledge, right? Everyone's got a different knowledge fingerprint. They're having to like
Yeah.
assume something, and it's very hard to make that explicit. So they'll just make sweeping statements like you need this level of math and this level of like, coding skills, whatever else. Yeah, and this like one size fits all education is like why I think there's a lot of problems. It's also just
Yes.
very hard. Okay, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, go on, go on, go on.
I think I'm waffling now, so you can go on.
So what do you think about AI in the future? Because AI is all about personalization, right? I mean, probably we're not there yet. It won't be in the future. But do you think that it's going to help us to personalize our learning? Maybe we give them like, prompt saying like, these are the stuff that I know, tell me what else I need to study.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm a heavy user of AI, but I think just 2 things to bear in mind. One is we need to be the ones doing the thinking, right? Like as I've said,
Mm.
if you want to perform, knock yourself out, use AI. If you want to learn something, like you can't be letting AI think for you, right? I have a nice phrase that I use for this, or I think it's a nice phrase at least, which is like don't trade your potential for dependency on someone else's product, right? There are many products that would love to lock you in and basically tell you that all you need is my AI tool to think for you to do your job. You're effectively trading your potential there, your ability as a human to acquire new knowledge and become an expert for dependency on someone else's product. And once that product's gone or it changes or they ramp up the prices, well, you're a bit screwed. Also, AI hallucinates right at the moment, and we haven't got a good solution to this. To some extent, it's intrinsic in the architectures that current models use. And that problem, I think, is a little bit of a no-no in education. Like, I think all these platforms, maybe I'll regret saying this, but if you're just using AI-generated content for learning, you're making QA like the user's problem. And I think that's just really poor as a product experience, right? Like people at this point of learning are usually, as I've said, at the edge of their working memory. Like it's quite sometimes can be quite emotional if you're learning something new or frustrated trying to understand it. if you then found out that the thing you were being taught is not factually accurate or has just got errors, it's like very, very frustrating, right? Like it can be almost anger inducing at that point. So I'm very bullish on AI, but I think there are some fundamental problems that need to be resolved first, and also we need to not forget that we need to be the ones putting in the cognitive work. I do think AI has got great potential in terms of like generating content that's then human reviewed, etc., and being able to like personalize some of the learning experiences. But yeah, it can't replace the thinking. The thinking has to be done by the human.
Got it. Thank you, Mark.
Cool. Were there any more questions? Because I was going to jump to the almost the last thing now, which is just doing a quick demo of Nodeledge.
So check if anyone has any questions. I think I've already asked all the questions that I've received from the chat or from our audience earlier. I think we're good now, Mark.
Okay, cool. Let's do it then. So as I said, Nodeledge is focused on teaching people to code and other aspects of learning machine learning, like some of the maths behind machine learning. Apologies in advance if that's not your bag. But the principles on which Nodeledge is built on is really this idea of mastery learning and using knowledge graphs to empower mastery learning. If I was to try and say maybe the three things that I'm like doing here is mastery learning is the idea to make sure prerequisite knowledge is secure. Then we have the idea that like cognitive load has to be managed as a learner is encountering something new. Mastery learning like naturally helps with that because we can be sure via the knowledge graph that if we're teaching a new topic, people have met the prerequisite topics before. And so we just need to ensure then that we only introduce one small idea or concept at a time to manage cognitive load. And finally, we need lots and lots of like problem solving, active practice, right? We want to be giving students and learners dozens and dozens of exercises to make sure they get this like repetition, to get this fluency. It's very easy in learning to present a huge block of knowledge, like maybe a whole chapter, and then stick some exercises at the end. But if you looked at how much of the chapter do those exercises cover, probably very little, right? And we want to be making sure we actually get practice on all the sub skills that are going to mean we've got this foundation secure. Okay, so in Nodeledge, we can choose what's called a learning path. The one highlighted here is the essential Python for data science and machine learning. And if we look at what that looks like, we get this knowledge graph. This knowledge graph is made up of the nodes. Each node is a lesson in the platform, and the arrows model the prerequisite knowledge between them. The things that are highlighted in aqua or blue are things that have already been mastered. And so this is how mastery learning works in practice, right? We master lessons, we work up this skill tree, and doing so we unlock future lessons once we've mastered the prerequisite knowledge. We can also take a diagnostic test. If we take a diagnostic test, we get a report which tells us how we did, splits it across all the different topics in the learning path, and that will pre-populate our knowledge graph for us. So like I said, we don't have to start at the very bottom if we already know something. We can sit a diagnostic test, we can get this knowledge fingerprint pre-populated for us, and then we can immediately start working at the edge of our knowledge. Okay, so if we come in to take a lesson, I'm just going to click on one that's already in progress. The main idea when we're taking lessons is to manage cognitive load and to get plenty of active practice. So in Nodeledge, a lesson is broken into what I call nodelets, or just like parts or subtopics, for example, that further scaffold the lesson to manage cognitive load. So if I clicked into a lesson here, we get this like interactive Python editor and some content on the left. And the kind of idea is that we want to follow is we want a minimal explanation of something and then straight into active practice, straight into problem solving. We also want a simple UI. We want minimal clutter. We don't want any distraction in the environment that's going to take up space in working memory. So we could obviously run some Python code, here. This will give us an answer. We can choose the answer option, and then we can move on. And through this way, we get active practice interleaved with minimal explanation, minimal dose of content, and then plenty of active practice. Currently, there's over 1,500 questions, practice problems in Nodeledge across around 160 topics. And finally, we have all the content available for review at any point in time. There's also some cool stuff where we can, not here, we can have these nice, if we look at some math content, we can have nice interactive visualizations, which help us build our conceptual understanding. There's dozens of these across the platform that help build our conceptual as well as procedural fluency with topics. So I think that's everything in terms of demo. One thing, need to keep presenting, is if you use this code, if people are interested in signing up for Nodeledge, if you enter the promo code, the journey node, then you'll get 20% off your first payment. So you can either go to nodeledge.ai, enter this, or scan the QR code here. I think Tom will share the slides. I think that's all I wanted to cover today. I'm happy now to take any questions people have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. I do have a few questions from our audience. So I think probably let's go through one by one. Probably I think mainly they ask for your advice, I think, in learning more effectively. So the first question is, I have difficulty with concentration, not taking, getting main points and expressing my ideas. So I would like to ask more about how I can learn systematically, know where to start to learn a field, and then go from the foundation and then to, deepen the knowledge effectively and consistently.
Okay, I'll try and parse that. I think my my working memory blew a little bit then. Jokes. Well, I mean, there's quite a lot in there, right? I'll do my best to unpack some of it. So, I mean, I think for the person involved, they mentioned several things, right? They mentioned like note taking, being systematic. And
Have
what were the
difficulty with concentration, getting the main points and expressing their ideas.
So I would be interested in trying for the person to try and understand like why this is occurring. So if we take getting the main points, for me, the like science of learning answer here would be like you're missing prerequisite knowledge, right? If you have prerequisite knowledge in place and the explanation is, not a complete dud, then you should be able to comprehend what's being presented to you, right? So I would encourage the person to think about if what they're learning is appropriate for their prerequisite knowledge. And if it's not, can they identify which key parts of the prerequisite knowledge they're missing and find resources for them and be systematic about filling that. I think there's a point in there around concentration as well. Like I think I would again ask like when is this or why is this occurring? Like if you are watching a video and you are struggling to concentrate, often that's just because it's a passive process, right? It's easier to drift when you're not fully paying attention to something or look at some stimuli. The concentration is almost habit forming as well. And I know there's don't want to say the word epidemic, but like we are in a in a society now where like concentration is in the attention is in the toilet, right? People struggle to pay attention for long periods of time because social media has like to some extent destroyed that capacity. So that's like a habit or a muscle we would have to learn. But as I think I said earlier in the presentation as well, often the reasons we like drift out of concentration is because our working memory blows, right? So we like disengage, we feel overwhelmed, we lose a thread, and we just start looking at something else. Again, this comes back to prerequisite knowledge, right? Like that usually happens when we're not ready for the explanation or the concept we're trying to learn. Or we are ready, but the explanation itself is just too big to fit into working memory. At that point, we have to break it down, right? We have to chunk it somehow, split it into smaller building blocks. Sorry, could you just do a check that I answered like question. If you
Yeah, and then just yeah, you did answer part of the question, and then just a little bit last part is where do I start? Like how do I know where to start when she learns something new?
I mean, this is going to be subject area or field dependent, right? Like, I don't know what the person's trying to learn. I think I would always be cautious around some of the classic textbooks that you see recommended online because often they're the tech bros or the people who are sharing their bravado at learning something, and it's like the canonical text, that's a reference text. Whereas if you're trying to learn independently, you need something that's much, much gentler because you're going to have no one else there who's able to explain things to you or help you when you get stuck. Like the text you learn from as an independent learner need to be quite different from the textbooks that you would probably have at university when you're part of a cohort with a lecturer there and a class full of other students who are all going through the same problem assignments and you can talk to get yourself unblocked when you get stuck. Ideally, if you're looking for resources as a beginner, you need to make sure there's dozens and dozens or hundreds of like practice problems. You need the solutions. Like, do not feel guilty about looking at solutions once you've had an honest attempt. You also ideally want something where you can be sure that you've got reasonably the prerequisite knowledge to tackle that textbook, and then that the explanations provided, like, are thorough enough to scaffold things carefully. We're not encountering textbooks where they jump 3 steps in one go and expect you to fill in the blanks. So that's just like frustrating experience, causes people to disengage. I mean, I think if the person who asked this question can be a little bit more specific, perhaps either in the community or email me about what they're interested in, then I can maybe tailor the advice a bit more.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. So let's take an example when you self-study something new. Obviously, like for example, myself, I'm learning a new skills. I don't have a tutor. I just have, the online platform and, the new skills and a lot of free resources online on YouTube, etc. How do you usually approach that? Like, how do you usually study the new knowledge? Do you have any frameworks or any steps that you start with? So, for example, I'm thinking things like asking yourself questions, what are things I need to know? Like, what is my goal? How much time I can put into this new topic every day to learn it?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, like you can pick between many different or you can spend ages like debating which is the right resource or which is the right textbook. But to some extent, the answer to that is the one you're going to engage with most, right? The thing you can be consistent at is what will cause the changes. Like this is going to compound over time. To some extent, learning is intrinsically tied with habit formation, right? Like the fact we can turn up consistently each day and engage with in the learning process is going to be more powerful than if we get really excited about something and then stop after a week, like a gym membership, for example. But it's important to mention one other finding from the science of learning here, which is the people who learn best are not more motivated than the rest of us. They're not motivated and therefore they achieve. Like the causal arrow is the other way around. Like people become motivated because they taste achievement. So when you're choosing which resources, you ideally want to choose something that's like going to give you this like feedback loop. Like you can taste the achievement, you can see your progress like almost on the day or weekly scale, right? That's going to cause you to feel more motivated. You'll be able to see that you're actually growing stronger and you're more likely to engage. Just stepping back again to talk about this, like I am a bit of a geek when it comes to scoping out courses. So I would take a course and I would do what's called auditing it. I would always have these templates in Google Sheets where I'd go through the course, I'd write down all the modules, I'd add up the assignments, I would count how many questions are in each assignment, what exams, and I would try and calculate how long I thought the whole thing would take me. Then I would look at when I wanted to learn it by, and I'd kind of work out like what my weekly cadence in terms of hours had to be. I'd look at the ratio of like number of questions, whether it has solutions to the amount of material, whether I thought there was enough practice in there. And then I'd look at what other supporting resources they were. Like if I knew that this, was a bit lacking in an area that I was particularly interested in, then I'd look at identifying supporting resources for that. And I can't stress this enough. You have to look for supporting resources that are designed for independent learning, right? And with as much active practice as possible. It is so easy today, and you see all these AI agent courses and whatever else, God knows, like popping up where people are trying to sell you a course for thousands of pounds, and it's like 10 hours of videos. It's like no one is learning anything from watching 10 hours of videos. Like you might feel good about yourself in the moment because it sounds cool, but you don't retain anything. And so you really need to be getting this idea of like active practice um, through any course or resource that you choose, basically, whether it's textbook or online lectures.
I completely agree as well. I think to us as well at the Journey Note, everything we want to do is, to help people to have an action plan or actually do something after, learning something new. I think that's the most important thing. If you just, reactively watching lots of videos and don't do anything about it, the next day you're going to forget about the content for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can also overthink these things as well, and I've definitely been guilty of that. Like,
Mm.
I also think there's like, sometimes two tracks to how you want to learn. There's like the structured foundations first, mastery, learning, progression. That's like a slow burner. That's going to pay off over the longer term. There's also like what I call eating your dessert first, which is like, going and having a fun or a play area where you can work on projects that excite you. Maybe you don't have all the background knowledge, but you're going to figure it out. It's going to be a bit messy, but it is fueling your motivation and you're learning in a slightly more unstructured way. But it is keeping the fire alive in terms of why you're actually learning this thing. Because if someone tells you, oh, you can learn machine learning, sure, but it's a 3 year grind through all of math and all of programming, you'll be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. You need to have both tracks together, right? You need to be working forwards on solidifying your foundations, but then potentially working backwards from cool projects that you're interested in that are appropriate for your level.
And the next question is, Mark, can you share a moment or from your experience, if you have any, when you applied learning science, like the mastery learning, and it made a big difference in how quickly or effectively you learn a skill?
Yeah, so I 2019 it was, I think. But I worked in finance, quant finance before I got into machine learning. I was getting into machine learning. I took a year off to self-study machine learning then. And I was big into this self-studying and independent learner back then. So that was when I took a load of like courses. Like there's a load of like OCW, MIT courses on maths and machine learning, and really tried to apply these principles then basically. So it wasn't mastery learning then. I didn't really know about mastery learning, but it was heavily focused on like active problem solving, active recall, and making sure foundations are secure. And I spend most of my time doing things that are not passive consumption. So yeah, that's an example.
Amazing, thank you. And I have two more questions, if that's
Yeah, of
okay.
course, of course.
Another one is, what is the most effective way to use knowledge to learn and master new skills? Are there any best practices in leveraging the platform?
Um, I mean, to some extent, the platform doesn't give you many options by design. Like, it's quite opinionated on what you need to do and in which order you need to do it. So, if you were to get started, like, you would only be allowed to take the lessons for which the platform thinks you've mastered the prerequisite knowledge, unless you take I mean, you can obviously, like I've said, take a diagnostic test to start from a higher place point. But after that, you will just follow what the platform suggests for you to learn next. If anyone signs up and finds it's not as simple as that, then please let me know because the kind of idea with the platform is to be quite opinionated around how learning should look, um, which not everyone will like, but I think is the most effective and evidence-based way to do it.
Right, thank you. And the last one from our audience, space repetition and retrieval practice are key techniques in learning science. How can busy professionals apply these strategies effectively without feeling overwhelmed? I think I kind of share this as well, right? Like if you have a very busy schedule, by the end of the day, probably, you run out of energy to do anything else. So I think it's very important to know, how to learn, for example, after work to upskill yourself.
I mean, my advice would be don't learn after work, right? I have no brain capacity left after work. if I self-studied before, I would always do it before work. I'm an early riser. I would get up and do an hour before work. Um, that's just handling your like mental capacity and enthusiasm at that point in time. Like I think if you're struggling with habit formation, you want to like put the thing that is a priority like as soon in the day as possible, right? Before the day swamps you and takes over with all its other competing priorities and interests. In terms of spaced repetition, like there's no good answer here, right? Like I think there's Anki, you can create your own decks and use it, but Anki can be quite overwhelming. Like for people who've used spaced repetition software, like you end up with thousands upon thousands of reviews. Um, there's a slightly geeky point here around knowledge graphs, which can help you, which is what Nodeledge does, is if you think of spaced repetition in a knowledge graph, and you think of, say, answering a question on a higher level topic, let's say you're doing some advanced topic. Well, by doing that advanced topic, you are implicitly rehearsing sub skills. You're implicitly, like if you do, you know, again, let's say Pythagoras' theorem, you've implicitly practiced squaring numbers, you've implicitly practiced addition, etc. But you shouldn't need to study your Anki cards on squaring numbers and addition. So you can basically knock out a load of the reviews that you need to do in a traditional spaced repetition system if you have a knowledge graph, basically, to power that. But I think, yeah, if the person wants to message me with any more specifics, I think spaced repetition is the best way. The downside of spaced repetition is it can get quite overwhelming if it's not done in a very like clever manner, and you need software generally to schedule it for you to do this. It's kind of hard to do manually.
Great stuff. Thank you, Mark. And before we wrap up, one final one from me. So if our audience, we finish our session today, they're going to go away and start learning a new skill or learning something new. What are the top 3 things you want to tell our audience?
Um, Top 3 things. Okay, I'm going to say figure out if you've got the prerequisite knowledge for what you want to learn. It is the best single predictor of whether you're going to be able to learn the thing or not. Be active. Make sure that you have lots of problems. If the thing you're learning from doesn't have them, you need to find a way to construct them. It's the single most effective technique. And the third thing is find a way to fight forgetting. And if you want to keep it long-term memory over time, you're going to have some review process. Otherwise, you're going to be one of those people who's forgotten more than they know. And we're after long-term changes in memory here that are durable. So they were the 3 things, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think we're on top of the hour. So again, thank you, Mark, for sharing those incredible insights and practical strategies today. I hope everyone found today's session as inspiring and actionable as I did. I would love to hear your thoughts, so please fill out the feedback form if you have some time. As always, today's session materials will be uploaded to our community channel. I've left the links in the event description on YouTube and will email them to our Zoom attendees today as well. You're welcome to join our community. It's free. So as Mark mentioned earlier, you can connect with him on there. And you can also get access to useful life skills materials and exchange knowledge with your peers from around the world as well. Thank you so much all again for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events, and please stay tuned through our social media channels for updates. Wishing you a continued productivity and inspiration for the rest of the week. Thank you so much all. Take care. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.